Once upon a time, in a dimension parallel to the kitchen cupboard, on a planet much larger than a jawbreaker, there lived a boy and a girl. They lived below a canopy of cotton candy clouds over peaks of rock candy mountains and beyond rivers and streams of maple syrup. They lived in a tiny little cottage made out of graham crackers. The boy's name was Granson and the girl's Hetel, and they were like all ordinary children except for one tiny little detail. They were made out of gingerbread, as warm and as soft as the day they were baked. From their marshmallow smiles down to the licorice laces of their shoes, they were cookie, as sweet as the molasses that flowed through their veins. Having finished brushing their buttercream hair and shaking the sleep from their gumdrop eyes, they were ready to start their day. With the most important thing of all, food. It was time for breakfast. But when they got to the kitchen, they were met with a startling surprise. They could tell something was wrong by the look in their father's lemon-drop eyes. "There is no food," their papa said, and as he looked to the floor and he hung down his head. "What do we do?" Hetel cried, as a single icing tear fell from her eye. "I have an idea. There is no time to waste." He gave them some money and told them to haste. And out the door they went, down a trail that led into the forest of peanut-brittle pines. Their gingerbread feet skipped merrily over the rocky road as they made their way towards town. For they loved the market, the sights, the sounds, and especially the smells. Their little mouths frothed frosting as they dreamed little delightful treats to come. But not long after they made it down their path, they came across a strange and curious thing. A sign they had never before seen. Right in the middle of the trail was a large cut sign of gnarly peppermint bark, with one arrow pointing left and the other pointing right. At first they leaned toward the path that led into town until they heard a strange, unfamiliar sound. Oof! The sound was that rang in their ears. They both shouted with excitement in the two little cheers. "Puppy! Puppy!" they said, and they screamed as they spotted the dog that they wanted to bring. Home. That was where they wanted to take the pup. So they chased him. They ran off into the unknown path, eager to catch the cute creature. They ran faster and faster, but the little yipping dog was always out front, just barely out of reach. They ran and they ran deeper into the forest. They ignored the sounds of the gummy birds and the gummy bears. They dodged the mounds left by the cinnamon ants. They ducked underneath the taffy webs of the sugar spice spiders. They were focused on the cute little fluffy thing, and they followed it. They followed it into the clearing, and in that clearing they saw a house. But it was not like any ordinary house. For this house was not made out of graham crackers, but of people. The house was made out of people. Dead bodies. The roof was tiled with severed hands of hundreds and hundreds of human beings. The walls were stitched together with muscles and sinew of thousands. Towers of bones held up a porch of arms and abdomens. It was a glorious feast. Granson and Hetel ran towards the house, chortling with sadistic glee. "What's going on?" rang a motherly sound, so Granson and Hetel took another look around. From the bone pan window they saw a smile and a greet of a gentle old layer cake who wanted to offer them something to eat. "Please don't eat my home," she declared. "Step inside, I have plenty to spare." They followed her into the house, and inside they were offered a seat on a table of spines on a chair leathered in flesh. With their bottoms firmly planted on the adipose cushions, they each grabbed a femur fork and a jawbone spoon. Resisting the urge to eat their silverware, they looked towards the cake woman. "Scrambled brains," the cake said with a grin, "with finger fries and bile dumplings." "Why, thank you, that's sweet," Hetel said with a smile as she started to eat. "It is, ma'am, we're grateful." Granson nodded and spoke as he chowed down on a slice of intestine rope. And so they ate. They gorged themselves heavy on eyeballs, ears, hair, and nails. They drank foamy glasses of blood to wash everything down. They continued to eat, and the sweet old layer cake continued to offer them more food. They had seconds and thirds, and by the time she brought out another helping of roasted spleen, the children were stuffed. "We can't eat any more," Hetel said, quite content. "That's kind of you. This time has been really well spent." "I'm pleased to hear you've had such a good time." With raspberry lips that held a sly smirk, the cake continued. "I hope you'll stay for lunch, or else I'll be irked." "No, thank you, ma'am. We really must go." Granson responded, his voice getting low, for he could see a change in the old woman's look, and that's when he decided it was time to book. He grabbed his sister by the shoulder and edged them to the door.
"Don't go just yet. I have so much more."
And that's when the cake pulled out her gun. She smiled and said,
"Now for the fun. I'm fattening you up because I'm hungry too, and by the end of the day you'll make a fine stew. So please have a seat and continue to eat."
With the gun pointed at them, Granson and Hetal marched the short march back to the table. When they sat down, the cake woman was already ladling gobs of grub into skull-bone bowls for each of them. A vicious crimson kidney soup. Even though it looked delicious, they were not hungry. Though with a gun pointed at their heads, they worked up the courage to take a bite. They ate, but they ate slow. Hetal bent over and occasionally slurped little sips of soup, while Granson poked at the eyeballs that floated on top. They were taking their time, and the cake was not pleased.
"Do you not like the soup?"
she said with disdain, as she caught a hold onto their childish game.
"Well, that's just fine. I'll throw it all out."
She made a scream and maniacal shout.
"But it's okay. I fully understand. You think you're clever and have a good plan. Well, it's a good try, and I guess it's your way, but I'm going to serve you one more course on this fine sunny day."
The cake woman turned around and walked toward the kitchen. She was heading for the oven to retrieve what was inside. And what was inside? When she bent down to open up the door, Granson and Hetal could see inside was a fully cooked human body, with heart stuffed in the mouth. And that's when Granson and Hetal decided to make a break for it. They jumped from their chairs and ran for the door. But when their moist cookie hands gripped the patellar handle, they found it to be locked. Upon hearing this commotion, the cake woman turned around and laughed. She laughed not just any laugh, but a cackle so loud that frosting tears blinded her eyes. And that's when Hetal saw the window. It was the same window the cake looked out to greet them. Granson ran for it. He saw the yellow checkerboard of the bone-paned glass and punched his crunchy fist through. His sister screamed as the jagged shards shattered. Morning light streamed through the zigzags of glass hunks. Granson took a piece from the window and turned on the cake. Boom! A gunshot echoed in the room, but it missed. And that was just enough time for Granson to lunge on top of the cake and stab her repeatedly. Raspberry filling sprayed everywhere in the room. Walls were soaked with a vicious filling. She cried and she screamed and she fell back onto the floor. Plump berries plopped from her wounds as she spurted and choked to death, drowning in her own sugary sauce. She dropped her gun. Hetal picked up the gun. With a cake woman in agony on the ground, she unloaded the magazine with the ferocity of a gummy bear protecting her gummy cubs, if that gummy bear had a semi-automatic. She unloaded on her over and over again until there were no bullets left in the gun. The witch was dead. Afterwards, they decided to ransack her house. They spilled open the cupboards and dumped out her drawers. They turned over tables and busted up her TV. They took her jewelry and took her money, and just before they decided to leave, they spit on her coarse face and ran out the door into the bright, sunny afternoon. They followed their footsteps back through the forest. They ran past the webs of sugar spice spiders and jumped over the cinnamon ant mounds. They continued to ignore the gummy birds and gummy bears until they made it back to that familiar peppermint sign, and they followed the path back to town, to the market. In the market, they searched around the stalls for something good to eat. They passed the dogs and cats on a stick. They turned down entrails, though not after having numerous free samples. They kept looking for the perfect thing, until they found it. A baby. It was more money than their papa had left them, but with the money they took from the witch's cottage, they were able to afford it. After they got home, they gave the food to their mother, who prepared a large feast. When the time was ready for dinner, they all gathered around to eat their baby. And they lived happily ever after.